The silence in that conference room was the kind that presses against your eardrums. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat nobody fights over, the one closest to the door, the one that says you don't really belong here without anyone having to say a word. My brother was at the head. He'd claimed that spot the moment our father's casket was in the ground, before the reception sandwiches were even unwrapped. "She doesn't need to be here for this part," he said to the attorney. "Not to me. About me." Like I was a plant. Someone had forgotten to move out of the room. The attorney, a trim man named Mr. Calloway, silver-haired, reading glasses, pushed low on his nose, glanced up from the folder in his hands. He looked at me, then at my brother, then back down at the papers. "Actually," Mr. Calloway said carefully, "she does." My brother laughed, not a real laugh, the kind men like him produce when they're annoyed but don't want to show it directly. "She's been living in D.C. for 6 years. She wasn't involved in the business. Dad always said she was the one who got away." He made finger quotes around that last part. "It's a compliment. She built her own thing. This conversation is about Hargrove Industries." "I'm aware of what the conversation is about," Mr. Calloway said. "Please sit down, Mr. Hargrove." My brother, I'll call him what he is, not what I wish he were, sat down, slowly, the way people sit when they want you to know they're only doing it as a courtesy. I kept my hands flat on the table. I'd learned that somewhere, years ago. Keep your hands visible and still. It signals you're not nervous. It signals you have nothing to hide. It's the kind of thing you learn when your entire career depends on reading rooms and not letting rooms read you. I should tell you about my father first, because none of the rest of it makes sense without him. He built Hargrove Industries from a single HVAC repair truck in 1987. By the time I was born, the third child, the surprise, the daughter he'd never planned for. The company had 40 employees and a contract with the county. By the time I left for college, it had 400 employees and contracts in 3 states. My father loved that company the way some men love their firstborn son, which, in our family, meant my brother inherited a kind of birthright the rest of us could never quite touch. My brother is 11 years older than me. He was already working summers at the company when I was learning to read. By the time I was in high school, he had his own office. By the time I graduated, he had his name on the letterhead. I was the one who left. Not because I was running from anything, though my brother would tell you differently. I left because I got a full scholarship to Georgetown, and then I got a job offer that made my hands shake when I read the email. And then that job became a career that became something I couldn't have imagined standing in my father's garage watching him grease a compressor unit at 6 in the morning. I work for the federal government. I'm a regulatory compliance officer at the Department of Energy. I oversee contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I manage a team of 19 people. I have a security clearance and a parking spot with my name on a placard and a business card that I've never once thought to show my family because it never seemed like it would matter to them. To my brother, I was the sister who went to D.C. and got too big for her boots. To my mother, I was the one who didn't come home enough. To my father, and this is the part I've turned over in my mind more times than I can count, I was something he couldn't quite categorize. He was proud of me. I know he was. He said it once, on the phone, the year I got my first promotion. He said it quietly, like he was confessing something. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." Then he coughed and changed the subject, and we never talked about it again. That was the last phone call where I felt like he actually saw me. He died in March. Cardiac arrest, sudden, no warning. My brother called me at 5 in the morning, and I was on a plane by 7. The funeral was the kind of thing my father would have hated. Too many flowers, a slideshow with a Sarah McLachlan song, people crying who I was pretty sure had never actually met him. My brother handled all of it. He stood at the front shaking hands like a politician, accepting condolences with this practiced grief that I didn't know how to compete with, so I didn't try. I stood next to my mother and held her hand and let people hug me and said thank you, thank you. He was a wonderful man, thank you. 3 days after the funeral, my brother called a family meeting. "Dad's attorney is coming Thursday," he told me over the phone. "Reading of the will. You should be there." "Of course," I said. "It's going to be pretty straightforward," he added. "The business goes to me." We discussed it years ago. It was always the plan. I didn't say anything to that. There'll be some personal items for you and Mom. The house goes to Mom, obviously, but the business stuff, the structure of that, that's between me and the attorneys. You don't need to get in the weeds on the details." "Okay," I said. "You're not going to make this complicated, are you?" I told him I wasn't planning on making anything complicated. I meant it when I said it. Thursday came. My brother was already at the attorney's office when I arrived. A law firm downtown, the kind with leather chairs in the waiting room and a receptionist who speaks in a library voice. My mother was there too, sitting very straight, her hands folded in her lap, wearing the black dress she'd worn to the funeral, because she hadn't yet had the energy to think about what else to wear. My brother had brought his wife and his business partner. The business partner's presence struck me as odd, but I didn't say anything. I took the seat by the door. Mr. Calloway came in carrying a folder, the thickness of a small novel. He shook hands with everyone, sat down, arranged his papers, and then looked around the table the way someone does when they're about to say something they know will land strangely. "Before I begin," he said, "I want to note that Harold Hargrove updated his estate documents 18 months ago. Some of what you're about to hear may be different from previous conversations you had with him. Please hold your questions until I've finished reading." My brother shifted in his chair. "The family home and all personal property therein go to Margaret Hargrove." He nodded at my mother. "Additionally, a trust has been established in Margaret's name to cover living expenses, property taxes, and medical costs in perpetuity, drawn from a dedicated account that is protected from any transfer or dissolution." My mother pressed her lips together. I reached over and touched her hand. "Hargrove Industries." Mr. Calloway paused, turned a page, and I watched my brother lean forward almost imperceptibly. "Is to be held in a revocable trust. Management authority and operating decisions will remain with the current board structure. However," he looked up, "controlling interest. 51% of the company is transferred in full to Bridget Ann Hargrove." The room did something rooms rarely do. It went completely, totally still. I heard my own name, and it took me a moment to process it as belonging to me. "That's—" my brother started. "Please hold questions," Mr. Calloway said pleasantly. My brother's face had done something complicated. He'd gone from leaning forward to sitting very still, and his jaw had taken on the particular tightness of a man who is marshalling everything in him not to say what he's thinking. I was doing the opposite of what he was doing. I wasn't keeping anything in. I just didn't have anything to say yet. My mind was very quiet, the way it gets when I'm processing information that doesn't fit the existing architecture. Mr. Calloway continued reading. There were provisions for my brother, a guaranteed salary, a 15% stake, his title of COO retained. There were provisions for employees, a small bequest to a local charity my father had never once mentioned to any of us. And then there was a letter. "Your father asked me to read this aloud," Mr. Calloway said. He unfolded a single sheet of paper, smoothed it on the table, and put his reading glasses back on. "Bridget, I know this will surprise you. I know your brother will have something to say about it. Let him. I watched you for 30 years. You probably didn't know I was watching that closely. You left, and I let myself be angry about that for too long. But then I paid attention. I saw what you built. I saw what it cost you. I saw you sit at this table for Thanksgiving and smile politely while your brother talked about quarterly numbers, and you said nothing about what you were carrying. You were always the one I couldn't figure out how to reach. I think I mistook that for distance when it was actually just you being further ahead than I knew how to follow. The company needs someone who understands accountability. Your brother is a good operator. He needs someone he can't steamroll. I'm asking you to be that person. I'm sorry I didn't say more of this when I could have. Dad." My mother made a small sound that wasn't quite crying. I kept my eyes on the letter even after Mr. Calloway finished reading it. I was aware of my brother staring at me from across the table, and I was aware of not looking at him, and I was aware that this was the most deliberately I had ever not looked at someone in my life. "This is going to be contested," my brother said. He said it the moment Mr. Calloway closed the folder. No preamble. Like a verdict. "You're certainly entitled to explore that," Mr. Calloway said. "She's been in D.C. for 6 years. She doesn't know anything about how this company operates. She doesn't know our vendors, our contracts, our people." "I know your top 3 contractors by revenue," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I know your liability exposure on the Henderson County project because Dad mentioned it on the phone last fall and I looked it up. I know your net margin has been compressing for 2 years because you expanded the fleet before you had the service contracts to justify it. My brother looked at me like I had produced something unexpected from my jacket pocket. I work in regulatory compliance, I said. Federal contracts. I read financials for a living. I'm not saying that to argue with you. I'm saying it because you seem to think I've been standing still. His business partner, a man who had been very quiet through all of this, looked at his hands. Dad didn't discuss this with me, my brother said. His voice had changed. The argument was still there, but something underneath it had cracked a little. He told me the plan was he changed his mind, I said, 18 months ago. The room was quiet again. I'm not here to take the company from you, I said. I'm not going to move back and run operations. I have a job. I have a life. But I am going to be a responsible majority stakeholder, and I am going to hold this company to the standard Dad built it on, and I am going to honor what he asked me to do. My mother looked at me. I hadn't looked at her in a few minutes, and when I did, her expression was one I hadn't seen on her face in a long time, something between relief and recognition, like she was seeing something she'd known was there but couldn't locate. The weeks after that were not clean or simple. I won't pretend they were. My brother and I had 3 more meetings in that conference room. 2 of them ended badly. He accused me of ambushing the family. I pointed out that I'd been in the same position as everyone else when Mr. Calloway started reading. He said Dad must have been confused, or pressured, or not fully himself in the last year. I asked if he had any evidence of that. He didn't. His wife called my mother and said things I won't repeat here. My mother, to her great credit, said she needed to get off the phone and hung up. I stayed in town for 6 weeks. I slept in my childhood bedroom, with its outdated furniture and the faded volleyball poster I'd never taken down. I drove past the old HVAC lot on Meridian Avenue every morning on my way to the attorney's office, the one with the sign my father had repainted every spring because he couldn't stand to see it fade. I went through the financials with an outside accountant I hired myself. The company was in decent shape. Not great, but fixable. The fleet expansion was a problem, but not a crisis. There were inefficiencies in the service scheduling software that were bleeding hours. The employee health plan hadn't been reviewed in 4 years and was costing 20% more than comparable alternatives. I made notes. I didn't announce them. I wasn't there to come in blazing. I was there to understand what I had been left responsible for. My brother and I had our worst conversation on a Tuesday in May, in the parking lot of the company's main facility after a site tour I had requested. He said I had never understood what it took to build something, that I had spent my whole career shuffling papers in a government office while he was out here doing the real work. I let him finish. When he was done, I said, "You're right that you've done the work here. I know that, and I know this isn't what you expected. I know you're angry and that the anger is real, and I'm not going to tell you it shouldn't be." I paused. But I'm also not going to walk away from what Dad asked me to do. I'm just not. He looked at me for a long time. "Why did he pick you?" he finally said. Not angry anymore. Or not only angry, something more like genuinely baffled. I thought about what my father had written, further ahead than I knew how to follow. "I think he trusted me to not need it," I said, "to do it anyway." My brother didn't say anything. He got in his truck and drove out of the parking lot, and I stood there in the gravel until I couldn't hear the engine anymore. I went back to DC in June. My team had managed fine without me. They always do, which is either a testament to my hiring or an indictment of my necessity. I've never been sure which. I sat at my desk on my first morning back, coffee going cold next to my keyboard, looking out the window at the rooftop of the building across the street. I thought about the letter. I'd read it so many times by then that I didn't need to pull up the scanned copy on my phone. I had it. You were always the one I couldn't figure out how to reach. I think I mistook that for distance when it was actually just you being further ahead than I knew how to follow. The thing about being the one who leaves, the one in the family who does the unexpected thing, takes the unfamiliar path, builds something in a place nobody recognizes, is that you spend a lot of years wondering if you made the right call. You build a whole life and it's a good life. A life you chose, and still there's this quiet space in it where you notice that the people who were supposed to see you first are the last ones to see you at all. I spent a lot of years in that space. What I didn't expect was to find the letter on the other side of it, In September, I flew back for the quarterly board meeting. Hargrove Industries had a 3-person board now with my brother, an outside director I'd brought in, and me. The attorney had helped restructure the governance so that neither my brother nor I could act unilaterally on major decisions. A system of checks, held together by whatever my father thought he was doing when he sat down 18 months ago and changed everything. My brother was already in the conference room when I got there. He was earlier than I was, which hadn't happened before. He had a legal pad in front of him and 2 cups of coffee on the table, one on my side. I sat down. I pulled the cup toward me. I looked at the health plan numbers, he said without looking up from his notes. Yeah? You were right. It's bleeding us. Okay, I said. I already reached out to 3 brokers. He turned his legal pad toward me. There were notes, figures, comparison columns, real work, not a performance of work. I looked at it. I looked at him. This is good, I said. He shrugged, the way he did when he was accepting something he didn't want to make a production of accepting. Dad built this company. I'm not going to let it get soft because I'm busy being pissed off. It wasn't an apology. I didn't need it to be. I understood what it was. A door opened not wide enough, and sometimes enough is where everything begins. I picked up my coffee. He picked up his. The outside director arrived 3 minutes later, and we got to work. I think about my father often. I think about the version of him I knew growing up, the one who worked 60-hour weeks and came home smelling like refrigerant and motor oil, who didn't know how to say I love you without saying it sideways. Through packed lunches and college funds and awkward phone calls, he always initiated and never knew how to end. I think about the version of him who sat down 18 months before he died and wrote me a letter and rewrote his will, and apparently understood something about me that he never quite managed to tell me to my face. I wish he'd said it. I genuinely wish that. Not for the company. I would have been fine without it, but for the thing behind it. The I see you. The I've been watching and I know what it cost. You spend so long wondering if the people closest to you will ever really look. And then sometimes, in the strangest and most impractical ways, they do. He couldn't say it when he was alive. He found another way to say it. I'm still figuring out how to receive it. But I'm working on that. I think working on it. I think working on it is probably the whole point. I've thought a lot about what my father actually did when he sat down and rewrote that will. He wasn't punishing my brother. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to read it that way. The prodigal daughter returns, the loyal son loses out. Some tidy moral about who deserved what. That's not what happened. My brother built something real at that company. He showed up for 30 years. That counts. My father knew it counted. What my father did was something quieter and harder than punishment. He looked at the shape of his family, and he identified the one place where the system had a weakness, and he put the one person there who he trusted wouldn't abuse the position. He wasn't rewarding me for leaving. He was asking me to come back. Not physically, not permanently, but in the way that mattered. To be accountable for something beyond myself. I used to think integrity was about the big moments, the dramatic ones, the ones you could point to, the time you didn't take the shortcut, the time you told the truth when lying would have been easier. And those things matter. But what I've learned, slowly, the way you learn things that actually stick, is that integrity is mostly about the small and visible choices, the ones nobody sees, the ones you make when you're tired and nobody's watching and the easier option is right there. My father watched me make those choices for 30 years from a distance. I didn't know he was paying that close attention. I didn't know it was building toward anything. I was just trying to do my job well, trying to build something I could be proud of, trying to be the kind of person who didn't cut corners, even when cutting corners would have cost me nothing visible. That's the thing about how consequences actually work. Not in some abstract cosmic sense, but in the plain practical sense. The choices you make when nobody's watching eventually become the person other people see when they finally look. My brother saw me as the one who left. My father saw me as the one who kept going. Same facts, different conclusions, because they were watching different things. And my brother, I think about him too. I think about a man who did everything he was supposed to do, who stayed and worked and built, and who still ended up in a conference room being surprised by his father's will. That's not nothing. That's a real grief, and I don't dismiss it. But I also think about what my father wrote. He needed someone my brother couldn't steamroll. That's not an insult to my brother. It's an observation about systems. Even good operators need accountability. Even loyal people need someone who loves them enough to hold the line. That's what I try to remember when the quarterly board meetings get tense, when my brother and I are on opposite sides of a decision and neither of us wants to be the one to give ground. I'm not there to win. I'm there because my father trusted me to keep something intact. The ethics of that, the weight of it, don't go away just because a decision is inconvenient. Bridget Hargrove, it turns out, is someone who can sit in the hard chair and stay. I'm still figuring out what that means, but I've stopped running from the question.